Hey everyone, I'm James Lynch, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, I'm going to be previewing the January 14th main event in the middleweight division between Kelvin Gastelum and Nassourdine Imavov. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Those things really do help out this channel a lot. Okay, let's get into it. This is a fun fight. Gastelum, Imavov. If you missed it, I've already interviewed Nassourdine Imavov ahead of this fight. You can find it on this channel under the UFC interviews playlist. Really interesting guy, of course, training at the MMA factory with Fernand Lopez and Cyril Gane and so many other great fighters over there in France. Let's do a quick tail of the tape here. This is a main event, obviously. So 5 rounds here in the middleweight division. Kelvin Gastelum, 17-8. Imavov, 12-3. 31 years old to 26. 5'9" to 6'3". 71.5 to 75-inch reach. So very interesting there. And this is a fight that was actually supposed to take place before. They've rescheduled it, and glad to see this being 5 rounds. Really a big fight in the middleweight division. Let's start first, though, with Kelvin Gastelum, who needs to update his Tapology photo. He doesn't normally has facial hair, and we haven't seen a clean-shaven Kelvin in a couple of years there. But that's another thing to talk about later. You can see there, Kelvin Gastelum, 17-8. He's got 6 knockouts, 4 submissions and 6 decisions. He's also got a no contest. We'll talk about that in a sec. He's the number 13th ranked middleweight. He's 31 years old, 5'9", with a 71.5-inch reach. He won season 17 of The Ultimate Fighter. I'll mention that in a sec. He's a BJJ black belt, and he trains at King's MMA. And I've also seen him doing some training with Captain Eric at Fight Ready as well. So not entirely sure what the camp's like. Maybe I'll try and see if I can get some insight into that. But at the time of recording this, not exactly sure where he's training. But King's MMA has been his home for a very long time. So I mentioned that there is the Ultimate Fighter 17 winner. He's got Fight of the Night 4 times against Neil Magny, Jacare Souza, Israel Adesanya, and Robert Whittaker. He's got Performance of the Night 3 times against Jake Ellenberger, Vitor Belfort, and Michael Bisping. Kelvin Gastelum did not have an amateur career. He just went straight to the pros. That was back in March of 2009. Didn't make his UFC debut until April of 2013, where he beat Uriah Hall. You can see there, he won the Ultimate Fighter Season 17 by defeating Keto Andrews, Bubba McDaniel, Colin Hart, Josh Saman, the late Josh Saman, rest in peace, and Uriah Hall. And if you guys remember on that show, everyone was like, Uriah Hall's the next Anderson Silva, and he's going to win the show, and he didn't. Kelvin beat him. So Kelvin probably best known for, being the guy that people weren't expecting to win the Ultimate Fighter, which is interesting looking at there. Kelvin Gastelum's had a couple notable wins. He's got 11-8-1 UFC record, 11-8 with a no contest record. He's got 4 finishes, some notable wins. I should mention this actually. Kelvin Gastelum should really be 12-8 without a no contest. So you'll see here, there's that fight with Vitor Belfort, which was a no contest. Gastelum knocked him out. Gastelum was popped for marijuana. Silly rule, something that I'm not entirely sure the rule now, but I believe now it's a lot more lenient on that stuff. It should be a TKO win for him. So realistically, Kelvin Gastelum should be 12-8. The marijuana wasn't the reason his hands knocked out Vitor Belfort. Probably made him a little bit more relaxed. But that whole situation with marijuana and all that is silly. So he should be 12-8 with 5 finishes instead of 11-8 with no contest and 4 finishes. Some notable wins. Like I said, Belfort should be a notable win, but it's not, unfortunately. Johnny Hendricks. Let's start there. That was a big win at the time. Hendricks, a former UFC welterweight champion. Michael Bisping knocked him out in the first round. That probably is the biggest win he's had, to be honest. And then Jacare Souza winning a split decision in that one. Jacare, a very dangerous fighter, someone unfortunately that never fought for a title, but definitely is on the top 10 list of fighters who should have fought for a title at one point. Jacare, a very dangerous fighter in that weight class too. Some notable losses. Say what you will about Gastelum's slide, but all of the opponents that he's lost to for the most part in the UFC have been notable. Tyron Woodley. This was at welterweight. Neil Magny, who we know Magny was a, still is a ranked fighter. Chris Weidman, the former middleweight champion. Israel Adesanya, one of the best middleweight fights we've ever seen. This is why it drives me nuts when people call Israel Adesanya boring. His fight with Adesanya was amazing, and he actually dropped Adesanya late in that fight. Almost won the interim title in that fight, but wasn't able to get it done. Darren Till, this was a missed opportunity in my opinion. If you remember, Darren Till came into the fight late. It was his middleweight debut. He was coming off the knockout loss to Masvidal, and he still lost. And it was quite shocking, actually. I remember going into that fight, I thought Gastelum's going to win this, no problem. And especially with, giving Adesanya hell and nearly beating him. And he ended up laying an egg there and losing a split. It should have been unanimous. Till clearly won that fight. And then the fight after, probably his worst performance to date in the octagon, getting submitted very early by Jack Hermansson. We know Hermansson's got a good ground game, but still, Gastelum should have performed a lot better in that fight. He then rebounded with a win over Ian Heinisch, and then lost 2 fights to Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier, 2 of the top guys in the weight class. So Gastelum's kind of in a weird spot where, he's losing to really good guys here. Like all those names I mentioned, with the exception of Till, I would say are pretty solid opponents in the middleweight division. But then you also look at it here, his last sort of notable win here is Ian Heinisch, who we haven't seen fight in a while because of injury. So he's kind of an interesting spot here. Now, Gastelum's had a few layoffs. Let's talk about those right now. Going from Neil Magny to Johnny Hendricks, there's the 231-day layoff. Going from Jacare to Israel Adesanya, there was a 336-day layoff. Going from Darren Till to Jack Hermansson, there was a 259-day layoff. And going from Jack Hermansson to Ian Heinisch, there was a 210-day layoff. So Gastelum, a variety of reasons for that, but he has not been as active as I'm sure he would like. Now, as far as why he's had some layoffs, let's get into that. Gastelum was supposed to fight Court McGee way back in December of 2013 here. You see right there, that was UFC on Fox 9. Ended up having to withdraw from that fight due to a torn PCL, so he had an injury there. Then he was supposed to fight Kyle Noak back in January of 2016. He had an injury in that one. It was a wrist injury, and Alex Morono ended up taking that fight instead. And then he was supposed to fight Anderson Silva. This wasn't an injury, but this was him being flagged for marijuana metabolics, or whatever it's called, meta something. I don't know how you pronounce that. Silly. He should have fought Anderson Silva. It was unfortunate what happened there. That was at UFC 212. Yeah, that was kind of a dumb thing that happened. Glad to see USADA sort of fix things there. Now, the one thing with Kelvin Gastelum that we got to talk about, we would be missing a big chunk of Kelvin Gastelum's career if we didn't talk about all the times he's missed weight. Of course, he used to fight at welterweight. He's actually fought 18 times at middleweight. This will be number 19 in his career. He's fought 3 times at welterweight. He's had 3 catchweight fights. So he's had a catchweight fight against Nico Muskoke. I think that's how you say it, Muskoke. This was back in this fight, Nico Muskoke. He came in at 172.75 over the 171 limit, so he missed weight in that fight. It was a catch weight there. Then he fought Tyron Woodley. Fight he ended up losing. He came in and missed weight there, coming in at 171.25. Came in at 180 for that fight. My mistake. They ended up making it a catch weight of 180 there. And then it was the fight against Johnny Hendricks, which he won. He ended up missing weight for that one, coming in at 171.25 in that fight as well. So just a couple interesting things. And that's why the UFC was like, okay, enough's enough. You have to fight at middleweight. And that's why he's maybe one of the smaller middleweights there, but he's not able to make 170 these days, which is crazy. Now, Gastelum's had a number of decisions. Some of them have been close, some of them haven't, but let's talk about some of the close ones here. The win over Uriah Hall, went back and looked at that one. 7 media members scoring the fight for Kelvin Gastelum, 3 scoring it for Hall. I remember watching it thinking Gastelum won. Some people maybe sort of buying into that next Anderson Silva thing with Hall giving him the win there, but I thought Gastelum won that fight, no problem. Rick Story, that was a split decision win. I actually went back and looked at that one. UFC 171, March of 2014. 4 media members scoring the fight for Kelvin Gastelum, 1 scoring in a draw, and 7 scoring the fight for Rick Story. So again, that could have been his first loss there if the judges got that one right. The Woodley fight, he lost that by split decision. UFC 183, January 2015. 11 media members scoring the fight for Woodley, 1 scoring it a draw, 2 scoring it for Gastelum. Again, people felt like the decision was the right one there. The Neil Magny fight, another split decision loss. UFC Fight Night 78, November 2015. 4 media members scoring the fight for Magny, 10 scoring it a draw, 1 scoring it for Kelvin Gastelum. So that could have been a draw instead of a loss here for Kelvin Gastelum. So again, his record could look a little bit different. And then the Jacare Souza fight, went back and looked at that too. UFC 224, May of 2018. 10 media members scoring the fight for Kelvin Gastelum, 3 scoring it a draw, and 10 scoring it for Jacare. So that could have gone the other way as well for Kelvin Gastelum, with that being potentially a loss. So that's everything you need to know about Kelvin Gastelum. Again, big fight for him here. He's coming into this fight off a 2-fight skid. He's only won 1 of his last 5 fights. Dare I say this is a must win here for Gastelum, although, being an Ultimate Fighter winner, they seem to get a little bit more rope, but nonetheless, a very, very, very big fight, an important fight here for Kelvin Gastelum. But let's talk about his opponent here, Nassourdine Imavov. Of course, born in Dagestan, Russia, moved to France, I believe, when he was in his late teens. You can see there, Nassourdine Imavov, a 12-3 record, 5 knockouts, 4 submissions, 3 decisions. He's the number 12 ranked middleweight. He's 26 years old. He's 6'3" with a 75-inch reach. So he's 5 years younger than Gastelum. He's got a 5-inch height and 3.5-inch reach advantage. So he's going to be a lot bigger and a lot taller in this fight. And he's also younger. So those are a lot of things to like there about Imavov. Like I mentioned there, he trains at the MMA Factory. Did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros. This was back back in February of 2016, a fight he ended up losing in the very first round. There's a lot of fighters, though, that have lost their pro debut if you go back and kind of look at some of the history there. By the time he made his debut in February of 2016, Kelvin Gastelum had 18 fights. Just keep that in mind. And granted, and that's not even including the fights on The Ultimate Fighter as well. So Imavov, a bit of a late bloomer. Gastelum, a lot more experience going into this one. Did not make his UFC debut until October of 2020 against Jordan Williams. And Kelvin had 16 UFC fights at that point. So again, Gastelum going to have the edge and experience here as far as that. One interesting thing I wanted to mention, and I like hearing stories like this. If you look at it here, Imavov actually started his career 3-2. And since then, he has gone 12-3. So good for him. A lot of younger fighters out there, if you're having a rough start to your career, you can still turn things around. Imavov is proof of this. Now he's fighting in the main event. Imavov is 4-1 in the UFC. He's got 2 finishes. Some notable wins include, well, I wouldn't really call Heinisch notable, although Heinisch has been in and out of the rankings, so maybe we'll include that one there. Edmund Shabazian is definitely a ranked opponent. He finished him and dominated that fight. And then Joaquin Buckley, his last fight. Buckley just more so known for being the viral knockout guy as opposed to being a ranked opponent. And then his only loss was a majority decision to Phil Haas, although that fight, if you go back and watch that, I mean, it was close, but also like Imavov's looked a lot better since then. I think we can all agree with that. He's only had 1 layoff in his UFC career. That was going from Shabazian to Buckley. There was a 301-day layoff there. You can see that, more than a year. And he was actually supposed to fight Gastelum in April of that year, but he had visa issues. So it wasn't an injury or anything. It was just had some visa issues. Another interesting tidbit that I think people forget, he was supposed to fight Gregory Rodriguez on Contender Series. Wasn't able to get that. I'm assuming that was also some visa issues. I wasn't able to find out the reason for that, but it didn't matter. They signed him to the UFC, and remember, he fought Jordan Williams, and he dominated him in that fight. Yeah, so, and then I mentioned the Gastelum fight. There were some visa issues there. The Phil Haas fight, went back and looked. Majority decision loss. 13 media members scoring the fight for Haas, 2 scoring it a draw, and 3 scoring it for Imavov. That was back in February of 2021, his only loss in the UFC. So let's get to the picks. And the bets, right now you see a lot of books right now having Imavov about a 2-1 favorite. And it's understandable here. He's younger, he's bigger, he's had more success as of late, but I think we can all agree here, Kelvin Gastelum's fought the better competition here. So it's one of those cases of, is Gastelum on the decline, or is that he's fighting good opposition? We're going to find that out in this fight. Now, Gastelum's got 5-round experience. Imavov does not. That was one of the issues in the Buckley fight. He did, or not Buckley. Actually, even in Buckley, I think he slowed down a little bit. But the Phil Haas fight, he definitely slowed down there. So we'll hope that the cardio is improved. It's one of the things I asked him in the interview. Says it's not going to be an issue at all. He'll be good to go there. This is one of those fights where you're kind of taking a guess a little bit because, again, Imavov's 26. We haven't seen the finished product. Gastelum's 31. I don't think we'll see much of a turnaround or improvement from him. Again, we talk about the injuries. We talk about the layoffs. I think there is a bit of regression here with Kelvin Gastelum, just a little bit. So, from that perspective, you definitely have to give the edge to Imavov. He's younger. I think Imavov, again, is, Imavov's the guy that's got to seize this opportunity here, right? Gastelum's been there. He's fought the Israel Adesanyas and the Whitakers and all these names here. This is kind of, like I said, a must win here for Kelvin Gastelum. So with Imavov, he's young enough where he loses this fight, big deal. He gets back on the horse. Look at a Yair Rodriguez. There's a good example. Rodriguez getting a big opportunity against Frankie Edgar, gets absolutely dominated. And by the way, I don't think that'll happen in this fight. Gastelum being the hammer on Imavov, but it just goes to show that, Rodriguez loses that fight. He makes adjustments. Now he's going to be fighting for a title next year. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, that, these fighters that are younger, they do have an opportunity to turn things around. I think Imavov is in that boat as well. As far as my pick, I'm going Nassourdine Imavov. I think it's a case of 2 fighters going in opposite directions. It is a fact that Gastelum has fought the better opposition. There's no denying that. And it is a little bit interesting that both Cannonier and Whitaker were not able to finish Gastelum in that fight. But you got to look at the damage that Gastelum's taken. You got to look at the injuries. You got to look at the layoffs. You got to look at the fact that this is a guy that is, had a much longer career. While he has more experience, that also comes with some wear and tear. And Imavov really hasn't had that much in his career. I just mentioned it there. This dude made his amateur MMA debut back in February 2016. That's not long at all. So I think there's a lot to be sort of untapped there with Imavov. He's at a good camp. Fernand Lopez, one of the best coaches in the world. We've seen what he's done with Cyril Gane and Ngannou before that. I put a lot of stock into that. And this might be a case where I'm overlooking Gastelum, and maybe this is the fight where Gastelum surprises and he shows that he's still got it. That entirely could happen. But I'm going on Imavov. Now, minus 200 is a little steep for my liking here. To be honest, I know minus 200 is not that much, but I do think there's still a lot for Imavov to prove here. I think I am sort of banking on the fact that he's going to look even better than we've seen him in other fights, and that he's made improvements. So I'm betting on that a little bit. So from that perspective, minus 200 a little steep. I think the play here is Imavov inside the distance. Now, again, I just mentioned there, Cannonier Whitaker could not finish Kelvin Gastelum, but you know who did finish him? Jack Hermanson. And how did he finish him? By submission. Imavov's got a pretty good ground game. In fact, he's got a good stand-up game too. We've seen some knockout wins here. What I think is going to happen is this fight's going to get into deep waters. And when it does, I think Imavov is going to catch Kelvin Gastelum at some point. I think what's going to happen is he's going to knock Gastelum down, and rather than go for like a typical TKO finish, because he knows how durable Gastelum is, he's going to go for that submission, and I think he's going to get it. I'm going to go Nassourdine Imavov, 4th round submission victory over Kelvin Gastelum. I think the play here is the fight inside the distance, just in case he does get a knockout, but I think more likely a submission. I'll probably play him inside the distance and play him by submission, but I'm a believer in Imavov. There's a few guys in this division. You've got him. You've got Andre Muniz, Drakus. Drakus as well is a guy that I think has some potential. I know he slowed down a bit in that Till fight, but those are the 3 guys you got to keep an eye on in this weight class. And I think Imavov goes out there, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to seize. And I think for Gastelum, I think it's just too little, too late. I think that he's had opportunities to win gold. It hasn't panned out, and I just think Imavov's going to take advantage of that. So that is my pick for the fight. Nassourdine Imavov by 4th round submission. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think Gastelum still has enough left? Do you think there's some value on him at plus money? Do you see him winning? Let me know. Let's discuss this in the comments. Also, like I always tell you guys and girls, if there's any other fights you want me to break down, just let me know. But I typically try and get the main events and the title fights and any other fights that I find interesting as well. So just let me know in the comments. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, and while you're there, hit that like button and hit that notification bell. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.